Teacher of logic, Dr. Deacon, Ananias. Teacher of logic, teacher of logic, Dr. Deacon, Ananias. Teacher of logic, Dr. Deacon, Ananias. Teacher of logic, Dr. Deacon, Ananias. Teacher of logic. Another good lecture, another good lecture, another good lecture, another good lecture. Another good lecture, 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 another good lecture.
The bell is rung, and class is now in session. Broadcasting coast to coast from beautiful Montana, put your chin in your hand and think along with your resident professor of philosophy, Father Dr. Deacon Ananias Sorum.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by the one and only Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. How are you?
Great to be back. Isn't it wonderful?
It is wonderful. It's been too long since we've streamed together.
It has. We got to make sure that doesn't happen.
I think we should have a monthly stream together that at least once a month we do some topic dealing with philosophy or using philosophy to interpret something. I'm for that. I think that'd be a good idea. But yeah, it's been a while. And I'm really excited for today's stream because we're actually going to be touching on a topic that you spoke about at Montanica last year, not this past year, but the year before. And my academic research, what I thought was initially for my PhD for the dissertation I'm working on, I thought it was more tracing the history of drug use, psychedelics in the contemporary period, but it's really turned into tracing what I call technologies of transcendence, i.e. psychedelics as material technologies used in a ritualistic way, and how that really bleeds into this sort of techno-magical, Gnostic, spiritual worldview of transhumanism. And so now my research is less on the historical use of these drugs, but how they connect into the contemporary 21st century sort of religious sentiments of science, technology, digital technologies, machines. And so this topic, I feel like we've kind of come at it from two different angles. You've come at it from epistemology and a philosophical approach, and I've come at it through basically tracing Western esoteric traditions, magic, Gnosticism. And now we're kind of at the same thesis point, and I think this is really the sort of, again, we're in the Great Reset. This is really like the crux of the future, is this sort of machine Gnostic science paradigm that's sort of encapsulating all of religion. Sorry, I laid a lot out there, but that's why I was kind of excited for us to talk about this topic. So maybe to get started, you want to just discuss most broadly this topic and sort of your approach or what got you interested into it.
Yeah, let me think. Well, I have a background doing my PhD work in the philosophy of science and the philosophy of mind. And so I've always been interested in science. In fact, my undergraduate degree had a double minor in math and science. So I've always liked science. And then, it's these kind of like rabbit holes that you can go down, and then you end up finding out more stuff. And so I'm trying to remember when this originally became an issue that I started actually writing on. I'm trying to think if it was as far back as when I presented a paper in Yash at the largest Orthodox conference that we had at the IOTA. I was already starting to touch on technology, and I can't remember exactly what started getting me to go into that area. I did read...
Father Deacon, some of the people said that they hear a little bit of a slight echo. Is it possible to turn your speakers down a little bit? Maybe it's a reverberation. I don't know how loud the audio is.
How's that?
Could be mine. I'm going to turn mine down too. So go ahead. That should have fixed it. I've turned mine down and yours down. I don't know what would echo. I'm not seeing any echo.
Any echoes?
I think we're good. So that Orthodox conference was the first time you started to sort of write about this Gnostic, magical, religious.
No, not even that. I started
Okay.
going into just Orthodox approach to technology.
Oh, okay.
I mean, a lot of things. When was that? That was like 2000. I mean, it was 4 years ago. So 2018, and stuff that was kind of going on in contemporary society was kind of forcing me as a clergy member and philosopher to kind of think through these things as like, well, how do we Orthodox think about technology? Is it intrinsically bad? You know, we just got to deal with it, or is it neutral? And these various things. And then what really kind of pushed me into the whole technocracy and Gnosticism and scientism was, so that already started getting me to read more of the literature.
Right.
But really what happened was the 2020 COOF crisis, and just seeing what was kind of going on. And then it was really interesting. It was like all these what would seemingly be unconnected things, like all kind of converged into my pineal gland.
Your third eye awakened.
Yeah. What's great is I go the other way. See, what I try to do is I actually calcify my pineal gland with this is the calcification of pineal gland called spindrift. No, I'm just joking. I'm just trying to lighten things up. So what had happened was seeing the kind of in my mind going into all the COOF stuff was, this isn't good science. That was kind of the first thing.
Right.
And I thought that, I'm like, well, I kind of deal with this, right? I'm looking at the kind of structures of science and epistemology and stuff, and you know, what can we know? What should we be skeptical about?
Right.
And I was seeing everything go wrong. But at the same time, also the kind of political structures that were determining this whole kind of narrative, right?
Right.
And that was really troublesome. And also seeing this, our Orthodox brothers fall for this.
Right. And the religious sentiment. I mean, there was this whole thing. There was like a mix between a sort of religious Puritanism, a submissive to like some sort of transcendent authority. It's very interesting how it does take a, you know, it seemed like it was the perfect storm in regards to sort of postmodern West that has no foundational basis anymore, to sort of scare people into this new authoritative structure.
Yeah, exactly. So with those elements, and then I was given, what was it, 18th, 19th century, 18th, 19th, 20th century social political philosophy class to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading up. I grabbed, you're always familiar with me citing this book. I used.
I actually bought that book due to your recommendation.
Good. Yeah. It's Machiavelli to Marx from Dante Camino. And I was putting the course, you know, I had the whole kind of summer to put the course together. I'd never taught a course like that. And so I'm pulling different articles and I'm reading stuff. And that's always really enjoyable as a professor. You're learning as you're getting, you know, not only teaching, but preparing to teach a class and put a syllabus together and the readings. While the COOF was going on,
right,
while I was dealing with writing, you know, epistemology papers from an Orthodox perspective and a theory of knowledge and different stuff like that, and then it all came together. And this was another book that, you know, I've referenced this. Yeah, there we go. Put your books up. Can we get all the audience? Pull your Eric Vogel books up. We'll hold them up together and
everybody
combine our powers. Like Voltron.
Gnostic Science books.
Yeah, that's right. And all these things that seem to be, not connected started coming together. And so I started doing, research into the theory of technocracy.
Mm-hmm.
When did this begin? How is it connected socio-politically? while I'm doing the stuff and the research about the medical science, the kind of cronyism with the pharmaceutical industries and these kind of big tech and all this. And that's how it kind of came together. And also arguing with people. Arguing with people online. Some people are like, why come you do that? It's so bad. It's like, no, it helps me. It helps me get outside of my head and be like, what are these crazy people acting like? Why are they thinking this?
Right.
And I always want to have that kind of psychology, or try to get into the psychology of somebody. It's like, of course they're wrong, but how did they come to believe this? Why is it? What's the psychology going in? And all of that kind of just tracing and writing and arguing helped me formulate all these kinds of arguments and learn about this. That's basically the long and short of it.
Well, now I want to move into, science really has never been that distance from magic. And so there's a misconception. And so now let's kind of take it back to the historical. Is in the history of ideas, alchemy, magic, hermeticism, these strands of thought about somehow through this sort of existential pursuit of knowledge about understanding the universe, understanding the world, we learn more about ourselves and we become deified in this process. This is the basis of hermeticism. This is the basis of alchemy. This is the basis of many magical worldviews. And that's what, then you look at contemporary transhumanism, the sort of existential impulse to extend ourselves into these sort of transcendent realms through the use of technology is what we're talking about ultimately as this sort of Gnostic Scientism. It's Gnosticism is sort of characterized, and people use in the contemporary sense, due to the religious existentialism. You're trying to escape this world or move into divinity somehow. And then it's sort of dualism or apotheosis, the idea that they're going to become divinized. So speak a little bit about where you see contemporary science and historical magical thought and Gnosticism start to sort of mingle together. I mean, historically, they've never been that far apart themselves. Maybe you want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the kind of misunderstanding, right? And people throughout history, even Newton's followers, have worked really hard to kind of make that dichotomy, stronger than it actually is. Oh, there's the rational, this is total kind of, coming out of the Enlightenment. But at the same time, there's all this hermeticism and weird stuff going on in the Enlightenment. But for the common folk, the vulgar kind of display of what science is versus kind of religion, right? You have that. I think you really kind of have people kind of, there's the rational scientific method, and that's completely divorced and shouldn't have to do anything with this religious sphere and the occult. But it's never been that way from the very beginning. And I know you and I have talked about this, and you got this book too, but this just through, the Renaissance is where you really see a lot of this stuff. I mean, we could trace this all the way back to the ancient Greeks, right? And the mystery cults, and Pythagoras and all these dudes. But you really see like Hermeticism and the occult and science merging, getting mixed up and pulling from one another in the Renaissance. And so Patrick and I always recommend, this book right here, by Culiano, Eros and Magic in the Renaissance, where it kind of goes into this. And it's a really nice kind of philosophical, as well as kind of, what would you say, sociological and anthropological kind of treatment of the history of what's kind of going on. I have received some pushback from people saying, using Gnosticism to describe science, science and stuff like that. And not from the perspective of simply thinking there's this strong dichotomy between the kind of the rational
Right.
Empirical versus the religious and spiritual. It's not coming from that sort of criticism. But I mean, obviously, there's a misuse of the term Gnosticism. It's become a pejorative and kind of popular term that people online can just label anything as like, oh, that's Gnostic, right?
Right.
But they don't really know what Gnosticism is.
Yes, and that's where I've seen the misuse of it, and the way that I've understood it. There's a prominent book called Technosis by Eric Davis that's talking about. Now he's in favor of a lot of this stuff coming out of the sort of psychedelic sphere of how technology and transhumanism is a sort of Gnostic impulse for the quest of gnosis, and the full attainment of gnosis is the sort of self-divinizing process of the transhumanist dream, and so. Yeah. Then Gnosticism is characterized by the existential pursuit, using one's will to drive yourself towards some type of ultimate transcendent goal. That's what I understand it as. People use the term sort of haphazardly.
Yeah, and then it makes my job that much more difficult. And I'll just read. I have it in a footnote in one of my papers, but why Eric Voegelin uses the term Gnosticism and ties it to science and politics, and people were upset about that. Thinking, oh, well, the modern scientist doesn't have anything to do with Gnosticism, ancient. Well, and I'm wondering if I could just share my screen. So, you disabled.
Yeah, I can make it so you can share it. Shareable, multiple participants. There you go.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
So here, Voegelin lists 6 characteristics of Gnosticism. I think this is really great because it's going to explain exactly why, even if we didn't get into the whole transhumanism and what they're doing, why you could actually apply this term to modern science. And I'm not saying everybody does modern science, but what's going on contemporary with science and everything that we're seeing. So number 1, it must first be pointed out that the Gnostic is dissatisfied with the situation.
Right.
Okay, that's good. This in itself is not especially surprising.
Right.
We all have cause not to be completely satisfied with one aspect or another of the situation in which we find ourselves. But here, it's when you add them all up together, you get a vision of what Gnosticism, either ancient or modern, would be.
Exactly.
2, not quite so understandable, is the second aspect of the Gnostic attitude. The belief that the drawbacks of the situation can be attributed to the fact that the world is intrinsically poorly organized. Bingo. For it is likewise possible to assume that the order of being, excuse me, as it has been given to us men, whatever its origin is to be sought. Now, I'm going to pause right there because people have objected and said, well, look, you have an atheistic kind of modern scientific world. What does that have in common with the ancient Gnostic who believes, and demiurges and deities and different stuff like this?
Right.
Well, at this point, exactly. It doesn't matter what the origin, right?
Right.
Like if they're an atheist, the idea is it's poorly organized, whatever source that may be. And it's likewise possible to assume that the order of being has been given, whatever its origin be sought is good.
Right.
And that it is,
and we can see an expression of this second tenet of sort of the belief that the sort of intrinsically orderedness of the world is bad is this redefining of gender itself. As we can see this sort of movement, the recategorization and the movement into this sort of Gnostic scientific paradigm where they've used institutions like the American Psychological Association to then justify and legitimate this worldview, this paradigm of the multiplicity of genders and all this different stuff.
Great point. So he's just saying right here, it seems kind of more common that we think, well, if there's a problem, it's probably me, right? Human beings who are inadequate. No. But the Gnostics are not so inclined to discover that human beings in general, and they themselves, i.e. the Gnostic, in particular, are inadequate. If in a given situation something's not as it should be, then it's the fault is found in the wickedness of the world. Good point. The third characteristic is the belief that the salvation from evil of this world is possible.
And that's where with blending machine we become immortal, we become omnipotent, we can live in our own imagination and become gods of our own worlds.
I think number 4 is really important too. And then you can even see like the influence of like Hegelianism within kind of the stuff that we're dealing with in our kind of contemporary age. 4, from this follows the belief that the order of being will have to be changed in a historical process. Right? From a wretched world, a good one must evolve historically. And then you get the Marxism, right? You get Hegel, you get the Marxism.
Yep.
This assumption is not altogether self-evident because the Christian solution might also be considered, namely the world throughout history will remain as it is, and that man's salvational fulfillment is brought about through grace in death. Bam, that's such a great...
Wow, that's an insight.
Total contrast, right? Yeah. Because we get these goofuses on here. I'm a Christian Gnostic. It's like, no, you're not. That's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And that sentence right there just proves it, right?
Right.
The Christian position is an antithesis to the Gnostic position.
In the way that we get into the eternal realm, we get through it through passing through the doorway of death, first dying to this world so that when we die, we don't die. But then they are trying to defeat death by like running away from it as fast as they possibly can by use of their technologies. And we can see this historically with magic, whether it be the elixir of life or the philosopher's stone. These are just magical sort of remnants of the same, now they have the real magic, the technology to do these things that they've been wanting to do for thousands of years.
Yep. And that's really kind of exemplified in number 5. With the 5th point, we come to the Gnostic trait in the narrow sense, the belief that the change in the order of being lie in the realm of human action, right? And you talked about, and this is going to tie into exactly what magic is, will, right? A will to power, kind of libido dominandi.
And that's where Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that's where I think it's really interesting to think about postmodernism as a doorway into the magical world, meaning that Foucault's understanding of power being the only thing that's real is really that is what a magical paradigm really is. It's about who's the strongest magician, who has the strongest will to dominate. And it's like that's kind of in the state of the world. The whole postmodern turn in epistemology is just bringing us into a sort of paradigm in which the magicians are truly in control.
Yes. And that's why it's an antithesis to Christianity, because that salvational act, as he explains, is possible only through man's own effort. So notice God's not in there at all. And 6, if it's possible, however, is so to work a structural change in the given order. So this both has a structural change, both has a kind of an appeal to what we were talking about with magic, but also what's going on in post-Enlightenment philosophy too. Is there's an attempt to make a structural change in the very given order of being of reality.
Right.
It can be satisfied with it as a perfect one. Right, so you'll start to notice in all these political philosophies a utopianism.
Yes.
Right, but a utopianism through kind of a will to power. Right, a revolutionary. I mean, the French Revolution for crying out loud, and it becomes the task of the Gnostic to seek out the prescription for such a change. Right, so there's the knowledge. There's a kind of elite class, the priestly class. Right.
Yes.
And knowledge gnosis of the method of altering being is a central concern for the Gnostic, as the 6th feature of the Gnostic attitude. Therefore, we recognize the construction of the formula for itself and world salvation. Now, this is going to lead us right into transhumanism.
Right.
As well as the Gnostic's readiness to come forward is the prophet. Yes, the Klaus Schwab, the prophet, the Bill Gates, who proclaimed his knowledge about salvation of mankind, and you talked about this in the talk at Montanica. That's an ushering into Antichrist.
And it's the demonic henosis. Henosis being a Neoplatonic term for like privileging unity over multiplicity. That divinity is this absolute oneness, and that when you describe those really insightful 6 points, that you saw this perfect one. It's like they mix the sort of theurgic, monistic elements of Neoplatonism with the existential elements of Gnosticism, and then with the materialism of sort of post-Enlightenment science and rationalism. This is then this sort of amalgamation and sort of alchemical amalgamation of this paradigm that we're dealing with.
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
A monster. Yeah. That's right. So, I think that itself, those 6 points, is a sufficient enough argument to make the bridge between ancient Gnosticism and what we're seeing now.
Right. Yeah,
And then I can see all of these elements in Nietzsche, right? In Hegel and Marx, every single modern political,
right.
And that includes liberal democracy as well, right?
Right.
And now you just have this new element when we tie it into technocracy, right? Like you said, these algorithms, it's these connecting all these points and making something kind of new that we haven't seen.
Right.
Because I've heard people say that, well, there's nothing new under the sun. It's like, well, yes and no, right?
Right.
But there is, right? This is something new because these connections didn't exist before. Yes, there's reoccurring themes and stuff like that, i.e. the Gnosticism. But here's something new and requires a new sort of analysis. And I truly believe that.
Right. Yeah. And as Pano said, I think that's a really good dialectic, is it's theurgy versus liturgy. And so this worldview is a theurgical process where through these sort of magical understandings, rituals, gnosis, semiotic structures of sympathetic relationships, that they can affect the whole. And I think, again, 2020 and the pandemic is a perfect example of how people are being manipulated and they're falling victim to this sort of this Gnostic Scientism. And you see maybe we can speak a little bit then to the religious elements of people who adopt this worldview that don't even realize they've adopted it, and that's one of the most subversive magical elements of this thing, is that it's rooted within words and again these very subtle presuppositions, and that's how the magician alters the perceptions of people, is through language and concepts. And so maybe speak to a little bit of how you see the sort of religious elements of people adopting or latching onto scientism in this postmodern epistemic turn. People don't know what to cling on to, right? Nobody believes in religion anymore. Tradition's gone out. Patriarchy's bad. Objective truth apparently doesn't exist. So now there's a global pandemic. What are you going to do? And then you've seen this latching on into scientism.
Yeah, and when I taught this course, I wanted the students to discover this, on their own. But part of the Gnosticism, the old world must be destroyed. So that is natural hierarchy, political hierarchy. This is the egalitarianism, the fraternity, the freedom, right? All that structure. Why? Because it has to be destroyed. Why? Because that's what's going to prevent your project, right? Those are the impediments, right? So the old world has to actually be destroyed, and now they're going to make a new world. But out of what? Right? And I mean, Nietzsche already talked about this. He was prophesying, in a sense, philosophically, about this is what's going to happen. He's going to remake the world in his own image,
right,
according to his own likeness, right? And this
right.
kind of protagonist, dictum that man is the measure of all things, and that's where you kind of get the will, the power,
and it's the hermetic. That's the hermetic dimension of this as well. Is the microcosm, macrocosm element again? Because that's the whole point of Hermeticism: is man becomes divinized and becomes one with the cosmos, and attains his status as the God, the sort of theurgic God, through practices of ritualistic magic, through understanding the sort of sympathetic relationships between layers of reality. And so that's what then, we don't need to get into maybe some of the magical ritual workings of the elite, but certainly elements, some of them, I mean, it's a factual statement to say some of them literally believe in the magical reality of the world, that rituals actually do affect reality. And so...
And I like that you brought up that's an important term for our audience, phrase, postmodern epistemology.
Yeah.
And because this really is illustrating everything you're talking about, Patrick, that it's a deconstructing. By the way, that's how we know that it's evil. Evil's not life creating.
Right, exactly. It can't. It can't create.
It keeps deconstructing, destroying the next. And you see this, like, there was a sort of optimism with the Enlightenment, right?
Right.
They believed in natural law, right? They had these different, they believed in, universal reason and laws of logic and stuff like that. And then that gets deconstructed, and the next guy comes along, and the next one. So now we're living in an age, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, because I think it's really important then to tie this into Hermeticism and magic, what's going on today with people falling into like a religious cult, that there's religious to this,
right?
Religiosity to this.
Yes, I mean, it's entering your body. This is the inversion of the Eucharist, in my opinion, because you see the forcing of it, right? Christ doesn't force. God never forces, because he has to recognize your free will, which is made in his image. That'd be to violate his own image. So God doesn't force us. We have to choose. We have to come by our own volition and will and align ourselves with him through the church to receive the Eucharist, where we see the exact opposite with this sort of new global sacrament. And it's the same thing. It's going to heal you. It's going to protect you. It's going to save you. It's going to, you're not going to die. Right? The same sort of, again, they've materialized the sort of spiritual promises of Christianity and then presented this sort of authoritative package where then the Puritanism, I'm clean, they're dirty, the Pharisaical, you can see the formation of a scientific religious worldview for the people who are participating.
So I want to see what you think about this, because I've thought a lot about it, is especially in terms of kind of critical theory, and Ordano and Eric Fromm and these different people about language itself, from the Frankfurt School. So now we have a thing that the postmodern, they already adopted this kind of Richard Rorty kind of relativism and stuff like that, and a kind of postmodern idea that there is no meaning, right? There are no forms, there is no nature, there's no laws, right? That's all been deconstructed, right? There's no universal knowledge or anything like that.
Right.
So, well, if that's the case, then what's the purpose of words? And you see this going on this very day, is words, especially politically, but you'll also see it as what's gone on with these debates and going on with the COOF, and also I'd say it even went back as far back as kind of the climate change, stuff. And anyways, I started to realize, well, they don't use words in the traditional sense, not even in the Enlightenment sense, right? They're postmodern. Words are not intended to convey meaning.
No, they're sophistic. It's a sophistry.
Yes, they're power words. They're what I call sorcery words. They're now used to cast a spell.
Yes.
Why? Well, first of all, logic and reason's racist. We all know that, right? So you can't, that's, oppressor, thought mentality. And also, we've talked about this too. You get this kind of amalgamation from different philosophy, the influence of different philosophies, like an existentialism, right? It's about the particular experience, right?
Right.
And a phenomenalism, kind of phenomenology that, but I feel that I'm right. Like it's the experience, it's the aesthetic, right? So now I'm part of this group, right? And combine that with the kind of like the stuff that comes out of Marxism and the revolutionary, it doesn't matter. There is no correct answer, right? There is no universal logic. I feel it's the ascetic. I'm part of this group, right? And so now it's power struggles and these words. And I'm
Yes.
telling you,
I love that.
science and the elites, they all use this,
Yeah.
are simply power words to cast a spell. Because
Yep.
if you ask somebody what
Yes.
these words mean, they don't know.
Yes.
If you point out that you're being logically inconsistent, they don't care because logic's white supremacy, right?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. They use language to evoke emotion. This was the point of rhetoric and sophistry, is that language was never used for the conveying of truth because they rejected objective truth. And so, like you said, I think it is absolutely the magical use, because what they're doing is emotionally getting you in a sort of collective group. And so then people collectively experience the same emotion by hearing the same rhetoric. And that's what Emil Durkheim talks about as a collective effervescence. Because you guys share the emotion, you become one group. You gain the sense of unity. And so that's what then they're using, as these sort of magical webs of words to get people to emotionally experience reality a certain way, so then it connects them with other people, and they're all then in this sort of magical web that's been casted.
Yeah. I mean, I hope our audience can see that it's total magic, right? And manipulation. So it's going to obviously have religious elements just from us making that argument right there. You should be able to see that, right? That, but it's further than religious elements too. It's cult-like religions.
Yes.
Because what are cults? That's why I always call it the Branch Covidian cult members, right?
Yeah, you can't leave a cult, right? And they don't want you to ever leave. You're not allowed to change your mind.
And when's the last time you heard a cult teaching like logic and critical thinking?
Exactly. Yeah. No, they want people to be emotional. That's why they get, and that's what I love when you're talking about phenomenology, because it connects the philosophical school of phenomenology coming out of the German idealism, post-Kant, the Hegelian stuff, the idea that my subjective consciousness needs to study itself in its interaction with then the grand universal consciousness to understand the synthesis that it's leading towards. That is Hermeticism too. That this idea of the macro and the micro, and so it's like phenomenology, the postmodern turn and the deconstructionism. It coalesces so nicely with the history of magical worldviews.
And let's talk a little bit about the ascetic too. That you could see this kind of, and all of these groups will be Gnostic. In fact, Vogelin talks about both the Bolsheviks and the Nazis were Gnostic, but modern Gnostics. And let's tie this into how are they cult-like? Well, do you notice they all have an ascetic? They all have identifiable uniforms.
Yes.
Right? That it looks a certain way. You want to be part of the... And I really saw this with the Kuf stuff.
Yes.
Is that it was a look, right? And it was identifiable uniform that people actually wore. And then it was these power struggles that it's like, well, I'm wearing my uniform because I identify with rationality and science. And you, your freedom or your backwards kind of, this really became a thing. But then if you question, first of all, they were using non-scientific principles.
Right.
They weren't questioning. And this gets into what I argued in the paper of part of Gnosticism too, is, what does Vogelin say? He says it's like a swindle, right?
Right.
And because you're basically doing something, right? You're doing something wrong. You're blaming the world being poorly organized on God or the world itself.
Or the Big Bang.
Right.
You know, for a lot of these people, they want to reject the first cause. So.
And then what you're going to actually do is you're going to remake the world, but you've got to conceal Yeah, Karl Marx had a concealment he talks about in his Gnostic speculation, and Vogelin says it takes on the form of an intellectual swindle. This is a great quote. Quote, Marx's prohibition of questions has to be characterized as an attempt, and I'm just going to preface it real quick, that what he's referring to is Marx actually is asked the question about, like, well, what about God and stuff like that? And he basically says God has become externalized. So he almost takes this kind of Nietzschean, like, you basically, the concept of God is you, right? That originates in you. And the whole problem with theology and religious folks is that it became something other than man. It became outside, and then now man's what? A slave. He's a slave to the concept that should be within him, right? Which is total nonsense. Mm-hmm. But what he wants to do then is, I'm going to destroy that whole kind of picture, right? And I'm going to bring back the concept of God into man. So what then he does, he says is, the question can't be asked if God. He wants to make it much like the logical positivists. It's not a meaningful question. In other words, you're not allowed to ask that.
Right.
The only meaningful questions for logical positivists are the ones that could be empirically verified. So anyways, I'm just giving you a preface to why Eric Vogelin is going to say what he says. And he says Marx's prohibition of questions has to be characterized as an attempt to protect the intellectual swindle of his speculation from exposure by reason. That's the question. It's like, well, wait a minute. Where's you question the presuppositions? What's reasonable about that? And Marx is like, you can't do that. But from the standpoint of the adept Marx, the swindle was the truth. So if you're like, what's the truth of that? Well, you've taken on this kind of, there is no truth.
Right.
The truth is whatever is my making.
Right. Or even my subjective understanding of my own experience.
Yeah. It's the system that I created. I've defined just like the logical positive.
And makes
I defined, if I made it, then it's true. And in my system, I made it so that you can't ask those questions because that's a meaningless thing and within my system. And there I've hidden my sin and murder and crime, right? That I killed God and all the world, right?
Well, that's what we're seeing with minor attracted people.
I've got to prohibit that. And so I think we see that in all, whether it's, National Socialism, Marxism, Bolshevism, or the modern coup. What was it? They said they never allowed us to ask questions about what makes science actually science.
Right.
And what good what did they do? They used power words and socio-political and other pressures to make sure that you didn't ask that question, because guess what? It would reveal their swindle.
Right.
That they're literally making this stuff up as they go along and creating unreality and presenting it as the swindle as if it were true and real.
Right.
And that's demonic.
And another element of that sort of cult-like process was cults. You talk about how they have a uniform, but they also have cult-exclusive spaces. And we saw that with the Vax Passport, is that was a marking of compliancy to enter the cult. And so then they try to entice people that, you can enter these spaces if you get your passport, you get your jabby. And this is part of a cult-like phenomenon to, again, the clean versus the unclean, to create identity, create new identity of self, which is that.
And it gives an elitism too, right?
Yes.
That's another thing that you see in cults, that you could have a privileged class. So they use.
Which is interesting, magically, sympathetically, they view themselves as elite because they're listening to the elite that are trying to control them, right? There's like a sympathetic connection of narcissism.
And then what does a cult also do? Public shame.
Yes. Oh, great point. Yep.
So to manipulate, you step in line, you don't question things because then you're the leper, you're the outcast.
And how do they shame you? You science denier. You deny science.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
And then they went even further than that. They went to they took people's jobs away and their livelihoods.
And did you see what the CDC did this week? Turned around and just went right
Just
back to
reversed
before
everything.
COVID, right? All non-vax can do the same thing as vax. Vax people can still get COVID. It's like,
And not to quarantine.
yeah, not to quarantine. It's like, what?
Everything that your good deacon here has been telling you
Yeah.
for the last 3 years.
Yes, they
Like the
admitted.
CDC just changed it. And I was the bad guy, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
It's like they admit it now. And that's where it's like, if you did get the jab, I mean, and this is where I did. I know a guy worked for a really nice job. I see him at the gym. He works out at the gym, has a really good job. His job was forcing him to get the jab. He didn't want to. He put it off as long as he could. They basically gave him a week. He had to decide. He went with the Johnson & Johnson because he didn't want the mRNA. That was good enough. They moves on. Now, a year later, he doesn't, like, there's no need for the jab, obviously, for everything, for the whole world. And I saw his post. He was very upset. I saw his social media post, and it's like, well, at least he got it. He understood that he was had, and he had his hands behind his back because his corporation, his job, and then his job was supplying his wife and his kids and their college and in this whole thing. So it's like his hands were behind his back, and then he already believed it was a sham, and then he got suckered into having to get it, and a year later it wouldn't have mattered anyways. Now nobody has to.
yeah, well, at least he saw. My worry is because I want this to be, it's not like, oh, I was right and you're wrong. Like, I feel bad. Like, I try to help people
Yeah.
on these issues as much as possible. Um, so I would at least hope that it could be a learning lesson, and I'm afraid it won't. Like, the memory of people is so short. They're so brainwashed
Yep.
by, and part of this has to do with technology itself, that all the information is processed faster and faster. And
Yep.
Larche talks about this in his book, The New Social Media, that it means that your memory is short. It means you're more easily manipulated,
Right.
too, and controlled and different stuff like that. So unfortunately, I mean, the whole thing, and this is, we'll get later into this, what technocracy is this kind of, we'll go into like what the kind of philosophical theory is. But just as a matter of fact, it's a type of cronyism
Yep.
of all the various, elite structures, from academia to big pharma to big tech to the governments, the bankers,
Yep.
all of them, and big pharma, and all of this collude together for mutually beneficial reasons. And a shared kind of outlook on a lot of these things. That thing is a brainwashing machine.
Yep.
It's the greatest cult religious brainwashing program that this world has ever seen.
Yep.
And I'm in the midst of it. I teach in the university. You're in the university. It's like,
Yep.
as much as I love my job, like,
It's really
I would-
sad. It makes you, if you're in academia, you basically have zero confidence in academics.
yeah, and the thing is, I would praise God if he smote it like he did Sodom and Gomorrah, and we rebuilt the whole.
We need to rebuild our academies for sure.
Yeah, like, we need academies, but I'm like, this
we
place
need-
is
yeah.
so evil.
Yeah, I'm not against
And
higher learning,
but-
obviously.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Such
one of the things when you're
brainwashing, I'm like, that
talking,
should be
it
destroyed.
reminded me of a stream that I want to do on Hermes and how he is the god of the information age. And if you look at the attributes of Hermes, you see that he's the god of language, he's the god of commerce and trade, he's a magical deity, that he's the god of information. As Mercury in the Roman, he has winged sandals because he's the god of communication. And so in the age of information, where we're communicating at like lightning speed, like Hermes, like Mercury, like he's the perfect representation. Like, out of all the ancient gods, the age that we live in is the age of Hermes. He is the god of the information age, and all his attributes that are indicative of the big pharma. Again, it's about corporations, about profits, which again, he was the god of commerce. So commerce, communication, language, magic, and it's like, that's exactly what we're talking about right now.
Yep. I wanted to add one other point too,
Sure.
because cults are totalitarian by nature. And I think what we're seeing and what we saw is totalitarian, and as well as having that kind of religious quality too.
Yeah.
So Augusto Del Noce points out that the distinctive ideology of um, technocracy or the technological society is scientism. And part of that is the view, this is the kind of religious nature, the view science has to be the only true knowledge, right? We talk as orthodox of true gnosis.
Right.
Orthodox use the true knowledge, right?
Right.
And I'm not ashamed to say that because, first of all, it's true.
Right.
And second of all, yeah, we're religion. Like that's so something that pretends not to be a religion and that's false and based on
yeah, that's a
false
great thing I missed too. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Theoria Zone also mentioned how Hermes is an androgynous god.
Oh, wow. That is amazing, these connections.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I thought that was perfect.
The problem isn't being authoritative or religious. It's the right sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like the right sort of thing at the right place in the right context and stuff like that. Something that's false and false presuppositions that shouldn't be in where it's at. It's sort of like, when your parents are like, don't force it or you'll break it, right? If something's not meant to go into a certain thing and you force it, right, there's a perversion there and there's something wrong. And that's what's kind of wrong about the scientism. Science, even if we could establish, and I go into this within the epistemology, of it being any form of knowledge, it would be the lowest form of knowledge, right? Inductive reasoning.
Right.
It would be at best probabilistic. And that's even if you could get there, right?
Right.
And yet, what does it take on? It takes on the kind of infallible magisterium that you would find in true religion.
Right.
That's what makes it religious.
Right.
But then it has to be totalitarian too.
Yes.
So this is a perversion again. Orthodoxy is true knowledge, and it's the only thing that's going to make you immortal.
Right.
Is what's prescribed in there and what Christ actually did. But what's going to happen in orthodoxy, it's not going to be forced on you.
Right.
But notice the perversion comes in the totalitarianism. And that's why he says that inevitably the technocratic society is totalitarianism. He states, now an advocate of scientism in a society based on his way of thinking cannot help being totalitarian inasmuch as his conception of science cannot be the object of any proof. So here's going back to exactly when I was arguing with people about the Kuf. You can't question the presuppositions of this. You can't question the science, even if you're a philosopher of science, right?
Right.
Science can't be the object of the proof. Right.
I mean, Hume recognized this quite early with induction. And it
Right.
that's what shows, that's why, again, it shows you the demonic elements is like, this game was figured out, a couple hundred years ago, and yet they're still like trying to justify it or get really just pull the wool over people's eyes because they don't have this philosophical grounding in epistemology to even recognize knowledge itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something kind of relates to the transcendental argument for the existence of God. The Trinity, as revealed,
Right.
is our epistemic standard.
Right.
Okay, as the psalmist says, God is the Lord and he has revealed himself to us. If that weren't possible, knowledge wouldn't be possible. So in one sense, you notice the perversion here too. Can God be the object of any proof? No, he can't. Why? Well, if you find the ultimate epistemic standard by which we make any judgments about experience, inferences, the possibility of knowledge and experience itself, and that is the ultimate epistemic standard,
Yeah.
what other standard are you going to use to judge that?
Right.
That is the standard. without which there wouldn't be. No, and I make these arguments all the time.
Right.
So what does the Gnostic scientist do? The Gnostic devotee of scientism. He does the Nietzschean deicide. Well, I'll kill the necessary preconditions for the possibility of knowledge, i.e., God,
Right.
and I will place myself there.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then I'll conceal the crime that I actually did. And then I will pretend and elevate science, which in Latin is scientia, meaning knowledge, episteme in Greek, and make it the apophatic, epistemic, apodictic. I'm going to give you a bunch of words.
I like it.
The apophatic, meaning there is nothing standing behind it. There's nothing more that can be said. Apodictic, highest, infallible, right, indubitable epistemic principle for the necessary conditions for the possibility of all knowledge. They have done a swindle. They have killed God and put science, which is a methodology,
Right,
and a practicality, as their God. And that's what makes them not only guilty of deicide, but it makes them the religious, the authoritarian, the Gnostic, and a devotee of scientism. That's how they all connect together.
and that's the sort of that's the Luciferian of it all. That's the false light, the sort of Promethean promise that the deicide, they supplant God with themselves, which is what Lucifer did. And the original fall, the bringing of evil itself is wanting to supplant God as myself. And so that's what then people are doing. That's what the institutions have done. Then people themselves are falling into that. And it's sort of this continual recapitulation of Lucifer, which goes hand in hand with Gnosticism as regards to Lucius, the light. So it's like people think they're pursuing this light of knowledge and they're progressing and they're moving forward in a sort of self-deification process, depending on, again, not all of them probably are totally as theistic about their self-deification, but that is what this is about. It is about transhumanism. It is about man creating these sort of deific categories through his own existential will. And it's just Lucifer over again being played out across individuals.
You almost got me there, Satan. But I like that you use the word to progress, right? This is a term that we're going to see over and over again, like even politically, progressive. Oh, he's progressive, right? To the progress from the Enlightenment and all this stuff. Well, do you know that this concept really is really kind of created or made more robust with the founders of scientism, Comte and why am I blanking on Saint Simon and their scientism. You actually get this. I mean, I think the idea and concepts already in, and we could trace this back to kind of conceptions of time. So the Greeks were cyclical, right?
Right.
This is everything a circle, right?
Yep. Literally just repeats.
And then I think modernity in deconstructing that then is progress, right? So you have this kind of linear upward.
And I would say the Bible and the biblical worldview influenced that presupposition because of the beginning, the middle, and the end concept of the sort of eschatological, teleological framework of Christianity.
Well, that's what I would say. Our time, an orthodox theory of time is neither cyclical nor linear or progressive. It's eschatological, right?
Right.
Exactly. Now, it might have elements where you see, like a St. Maximus, as the beginning and the end come back together, but not in the way the Greeks would.
Totally different
making
framework.
all things new.
Right, because it's not this transmigration of souls that the Platos and the Pythagoras taking the cyclical worldview believed in. No, you get one life, and that then I think is a presupposition, a precondition for this beginning, middle, of an end concept that Christianity, that is the worldview, and that because every single worldview, every single spirituality that believes in reincarnation is ultimately relativistic.
Yep. But I just thought that was another interesting thing that progressing.
Yeah.
I think Tristan Engelhart had pointed out too with this. I mean, progressing to where?
Yeah, towards
from
what?
where to where? Like,
Exactly.
what are you talking about?
Exactly.
Idiot.
And it's just, and that's what I think, again, Billington, that fire in the minds of men, that's the revolutionary spirit. It's the false flame of God, in the sense of, being on fire for God. It's like they get the fire of revolution, which is a deconstructionist spirit. It's about taking things down, and then we're going to build utopia. So the same Gnostic Scientism presupposition of the utopia, that something's wrong. Basically, the revolutionary spirit, we got to destroy it, we got to undermine it, which is what Marx was jumping on. So Marxism itself, and you see how all these worldviews, they just sort of coalesce together so beautifully that you see it's one ginormous 21st century amalgamation of everything we've been fighting. It's the super beast.
Like, your kind of thesis of blurring and dissolution of boundaries and all these things that you might think they were contradictory and couldn't be mixed together. It's like, well, surprise, guess in the new world, in the new age,
Yeah, exactly.
it all can be mixed up into a great, fantastic monster that will destroy everybody in the world and their souls.
Exactly. So maybe we can move into then. We still got. Let's see here how much time we have. We've been talking for an hour and 9. Maybe for another 20 minutes or so, then we can take some super chats. But maybe we can move into the technocracy itself. And so this is kind of what I was hinting at with my speech in Montana Go with the demonic henosis, because I see the technocracy as, again, a presuppositional paradigm, a framework of understanding of this dissolution of boundaries, where the only boundary is whether you're outside or inside the sort of technocratic worldview, the sort of technocratic cult. And the blending of genders is then in the technocracy, well, this existential, we create genders, we create the categories of sex and genders, we create the definition of man. I just did a stream on rootlessness and what I called the death of man, and that is the severing of this sort of ancestral connection of tradition. No matter what tradition it is, the history of men themselves passing on the lived experience of a man to the next generation, we are seeing the severing of that with the sort of postmodern global culture. And again, the idea of progress, which is part of this new definition of what man is. People aren't conscientious of it, but the redefining, the new identities, the cutting off your genitals, like this is a severing of the historical definition of man, which man has always been tied to the history of other men before him, and creating a new definition where male, female, it all blends together. It's a new concept and people aren't aware of it. And so maybe then you take it away, introduce the concept of technocracy, the sort of philosophy of it, and how, again, I believe personally it relates to the sort of monism, this henosis.
Yeah, a lot of people get confused and think when we refer to technocracy, they were talking specifically about like the kind of world, everything kind of going on in social media and the World Wide Web and stuff like that. Now we have to understand that it's a theory before we even get to the 21st century.
Right.
And what you see going on in the advancements of technology. Technocracy, first and foremost, is a philosophy and ideology before the advancement of technology. So it's technocracy and technology don't go together. Like,
right.
They're not
synonymous
they're not
terms.
Synonyms.
Yeah.
And people think that, and I have to say that too, because, as Orthodox Christians, we don't believe that technology is intrinsically bad.
Right.
And therefore, technocracy is not identical to advanced technology.
Right.
So I would argue, and I have, that technocracy, well, the seeds of it begin with Saint Simon and Comte's positivism and scientism. And that radical kind of shift in thinking about technology and the meaning of knowledge itself, right?
Right.
Kind of the scientific revolution. We can trace this back to Francis Bacon, right? Who's talking about a new Atlantis, that human knowledge and human power are the same thing. And that the Baconian kind of prescription of total scientificization of our world.
Right.
And so notice the difference between, I believe in science, I like technology. That's a bit different than saying we should totally
Right.
make the whole entire scientization of the whole world,
Yeah,
right?
and it's important to as you define the difference between technocracy and technology. A technology is a hammer. A hammer does
Yes.
not have moral ethical value in and of itself. That's why it's important to highlight this Gnostic spirit. It's the intentionality that is moving and taking the sort of scientism and technologies as a front, as a body. What we're trying to describe, the evil of the technocracy is the sort of spirit that is inhabiting the technology
Yes.
itself.
And taking them out of their proper place.
Yes.
Anything is evil, right? When it misses, like, it's not as it should be, right? When you take science and technology out of its proper place, when you take the world or genders or human beings out of their proper place and reconceive and put them somewhere else, that is the very illustration of what we mean by evil. So this kind of Baconian prescription of the total scientization of the world, where he conceives, and this is totally the Gnostic Scientism, of a new social order. I'm going to make a new social order, right?
Right.
And how am I going to do that? Not through God and the Christian ethics, but through the expansion of modern science, through and progress and human achievement through dominion over nature.
Right.
I mean, that's the fundamental change.
And that's the weather manipulation we're now seeing. The whole climate change is actually a pretense for them taking their technocracy and changing the climate. Not that, again, it's from oil or fossil fuels, at least my opinion.
So notice the kind of utopianism, but the kind of anti-Christian too, and the
Yes.
Gnosticism. The world's bad. I'm the savior, and I'm going to perfect it and make everything right.
Right.
Right? And how am I going to do that? Through science and the mechanization and control and manipulation to show. I mean, how do I prove that I'm God? Right? How does Christ prove that he's God? We read in the gospel on Sunday, right? In Matthew the story about Peter walking on water. Christ is on the water.
Right.
And what do they say? Oh, is it a ghost? No, it's actually Christ, right? Well, what is he doing? Well, he's showing he's God, because the ancients believe they have these kind of like they were demons, but like the gods of the water, the gods of the winds, right? They were totally superstitious and held captive by these stupid ideas, these pagan ideas. So what does Christ do? I walk on the winds and water, right? I have dominion over nature. He proves he's God. What does man do? What does the modern Gnostic do? I'm God. God's dead. I killed him. That idea's dumb, as the modern man thinks. I'm God, so I'm going to walk on waters. I'm going to raise the dead. I'm going to have dominion over nature. That's the Baconian, right? That's where it begins.
Right.
And that's going to lay the seeds for what technocracy is.
But that even has ancient roots in forms of shamanism. So we can look at what does the shaman do? Well, he believes that he can also manipulate the weather through the use of spirits and get into these altered states. And in a way, again, that's where I've made an academic argument that the drugs themselves are technologies for the purpose of this, and that's why then it bleeds into the 20th and the 21st century, and why all the psychonauts of the 20th century, Leary, Huxley, Leary, Robert Anton Wilson, Terence McKenna, they're all in favor of transhumanism. They're all in favor of existentially moving into the machine.
Yeah. Remember the Pink Floyd song? Welcome to the machine.
And so it's you see these elements everywhere, and
but we have to tie it into the political. So in order to get a theory of technocracy, I just kind of laid the groundwork, like where the spirit, kind of the seeds are coming from, this kind of different orientation, way of thinking about. Now, in order for it to be technocracy, it has to connect in a unique way to politics and political institutions, as John Gunnell points out. So in normie and in antiquity as well, I'm not saying antiquity is normie, but in normies' minds, the highest power are what? Political
Right.
institutions,
Yeah, governments.
right? I mean, that's what libertarians always get wrong.
I
Oh,
guess
we
the
just get rid of
UN
government,
now,
then
like
everything will be
these
fine, right?
yeah, these super governmental structures like the UN now or the World Health Organization, right? These things that sort of unify the governments, and that's why you see the spirit of against nationalism. It's like, well, we give authority to these unifying institutional structures.
But they're not the highest power. That's what the normie. So this is where technocracy comes in. The theory comes in and says that the politicians are now to be replaced with a parliament of technical experts. And that doesn't mean the kind of modern, sophisticated technology that we see today. But it's the scientists. It's the elite class with the knowledge. What
Right.
they'll call them the technical experts, right? Those are the technocrats.
Oh, yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And that's to be contrasted. They're not voted in.
No.
You participate in politically. They're non-elected experts, right? And so the technocracy provides, so going back, kind of connecting to Bacon, a new kind of vision of the world and mankind. So it's industrialism. That's the other necessary ingredient too. All of this technocracy theory is coming in exactly during industrialism.
Right.
Right. So that's why it doesn't have to be people think of technocracy as computers. It's like, no, it's
the bureaucracy.
It's the bureaucracy and it's industrialism.
Right.
So
Which they go hand in
technocracy
hand.
even all the way back then.
Right, and they go hand in hand with the
they thought
production.
an elite class of engineers, scientists, industrialists, and planners, just like you see with the EU, will systematically apply my technical, sophisticated knowledge to solve all problems, social problems, economic problems. This is exactly what you're seeing with the World Health Organization, the EU, and Davos and stuff like that. It's not just about climate change, is it? It's everything.
Right.
It's a whole. We're going to solve all the problems. Poverty, which is so stupid too, right? That it's so anti-Christian to think that you'll actually solve poverty. Why? Because Christ tells us, the poor you have with you always, right?
We're not supposed
You're
to
basically
believe
telling
in
Christ
utopia.
you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, and we're as Christians, we don't believe in like these sort of political utopias. The only utopia is the second coming. That's it.
Exactly.
Until then, there is no utopia. There is no stamping out homelessness or hunger or the poor. I mean, we got to do. That's why we're called then to deal with that and address those ills and that suffering, because it's not going to go away.
Yeah. So just think about it this way. What is technocracy? It's the replacement of politics by non-elected, elite class of engineers, scientists, and industrialists that will plan and change, solve all of your problems.
And it has that Platonic element. Again, we've talked about the sort of utopia, the Platonic element of the Republic, right? I mean, this is the sort of the fascistic, endeavors of Plato's Republic that we see it. It is a sort of technocratic framework of elitism and in these institutional, hierarchies where people move up and then they run society because they know better. Well, in a perfect world, maybe, but this isn't a perfect world. All this stuff corrupts, and so that is a terrible idea, and that's a perfect idea for people who want to control other people, and that's exactly what we see.
Yeah, and notice the connection to Gnosticism too, right? All of this happens. It's now closed politics, right? This is what the normie doesn't get. My vote matters, and I'm participating in democracy, and it's like it's all closed politics, right? That's why now it actually has been replaced. So technology has become autonomous, and politics is a function of the systematic structural determinants of the elites,
right?
Not the other way around, you dummies.
Right.
And so notice the Gnostic elements. Now it's closed politics, decisions made by secret scientific choices by the elites. Well, isn't that one theme that you see in these Gnostic cults, right? it's this, you'll be led into the secrets right behind
Right.
closed doors. This isn't for everybody.
Yeah, it's always
to see.
Gnostics. It's always esoteric secrets. There's always
Yes, it's
esoteric promises.
esoteric, exactly. That's exactly what I was.
And that's the whole tradition of Western esoteric traditions. The history of Western magic has been tied to this phenomenon. That's where I have multiple books here regarding the disenchantment of the world or the reenchantment of the world or the myth of the disenchantment. There's all these scholars talking about how science comes from the magical enterprise of the Western esoteric traditions. That the field of the Western esoteric traditions make a pretty solid case that if you look at all the major scientific thinkers all the way into the 20th century, and even people then that get into quantum mechanics, are all deeply interested in theories of magic.
Yep. So does that kind of help lay it out? Now, where do we want to go from here? Now that I've kind of
Well, I
laid
thought
out
then authority, right? Because if they establish the sort of technocratic republic style of the world, it's like you've ushered people in and then you debase them. So what is the question is, what is people's ultimate authority? Why are you and I not then falling victim to the technocracy? It's, well, our ultimate authority then is, as you said, revelation,
well, it's because I calcify
tradition.
my pineal gland, obviously.
But it's religion, it's tradition, it's revelation, and it's belonging then essentially to God or our whether other people think we're right or wrong. That's why then we're not falling victim to it, is because of our appeal to a religious tradition and to God.
Right, but there's more to it than that
Okay.
too. Because what was so devastating to me, and it really hurts, is to see people within our own Orthodox faith fall for all of this.
Yes.
And
Well,
what I didn't understand, and I had to kind of work through this,
Yeah.
is I was like, but you're in the true faith. You have all the tools that would keep you from falling, so why are you? That's what I wanted to know. Is like, we can all say it's like, well, you know, what keeps us from this is our Orthodox faith, but it's like, yeah, but these people are in the faith, and they went headlong into
Saw a lot
destruction
of them.
following the satanic, atheistic, Gnostic.
Well, maybe you can speak to this. All the people I know in the Orthodox Church that did fall victim to it, it would be fair to say, in my opinion, that they were certainly centrist or left of center on a sort of political scale. And so maybe you can speak to that and how that relates then with what you're talking about, the sort of political elements of the technocracy and the Gnostic elements and all this stuff. Or maybe you don't agree with that. Maybe you saw some pretty...
but far more so
ahead.
in centrist, liberals and the left.
I didn't see any really
I-
hardcore Orthodox people fall for it.
Yeah. So I think those in the right and conservatives who did fall for it fell for it for different reasons than a left-wing liberal, moderate centrist.
Yeah,
or
speak to that.
Something like that. I think those more on the political left spectrum, the reason why they fell for it, well, first of all, it's defined in antithesis to conservatism, right? Conserve is to conserve the values and traditions, right? In fact, the left-right paradigm goes back to literally spatial locations
Of the French
in
Revolution.
The assembly and during the French Revolution,
yeah.
those on the right that want to conserve,
Monarchy.
the monarchy, and the left was the, Jacobites and all these different people that
All the
wanted-
socialists.
the socialists and different stuff like that wanted to. So I think that's one element.
Well, what is there epistemologies different? I mean, speak to that. Like, what is the epistemological difference then of the contemporary leftist versus the conservative normie? So just normie framework. And I'm just,
They don't have an epistemology.
but whatever they think they're appealing to. I mean, because there's a lot of people that aren't philosophically sophisticated that picked it up, they got it, they didn't. Oh crap, they're trying to kill me with the jibby jab. Is this an epistemological thing? Is this a religious thing? Is it a spiritual reality?
Multifaceted, so
Yeah.
there's never kind of one
Yeah, what do you
answer.
think that is? What is it? Why is it that certain people saw it so clearly? I mean, is it the news, whether they're Orthodox or not? What's your kind of framework, your take on that?
Well, first of all, it could have. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. Like I said, there's not going to be a one-size-fit-all answer.
Right.
Um,
No, we're not going to
One would
reattempt Comte, right? the totalizing definition and system to end all systems.
Well, I mean, think about this, because I was thinking, like, I'm always trying to introspect on myself, like, because I made mistakes, and then I start asking myself, like, well, why didn't I fall for this, or why do I believe this? And I started to realize, just speaking from my own perspective, and I actually even think that it has to do with my name that I was given. Just like the Johnny Cash song, "A Boy Named Sue," that can really determine who you are in your life.
Yeah, definitely force a boy to be tough.
And so, I was given a pagan Norse name, Eric, with a K, right?
Yeah.
And that meant something to me. And the reason why is I never met anybody with another Eric with a K, hardly ever. And then it was like, oh, it's my identity, like that's my Norwegian American heritage, and and then I was like, Eric's with ERICs and ERICKs, they're different. Like I don't want to be. That's the other Erics, right? And what it started, I took pride in it, and it started forming something in me earlier that I'm like, I'm my own unique individual. I had a very early kind of concept of that, and I didn't like herd mentality stuff.
Yeah. I
didn't
agree with
like
that.
that.
It's been similar to me as well. It's just not always kind of button up or challenging group think.
Yeah.
Sometimes wrongly, but like even my push against
exactly.
Christianity and into psychedelics was like, well, nobody's doing this. You guys don't know anything about this. I'm going to do this, and look, you guys don't know.
Yeah. And then also, and maybe part of that, I've always had a rebellious, anti-authoritarian, questioning, personality, and what I really wanted to know, and I didn't. It's why if we went eventually to philosophy was such a good fit. I just wanted good reasons to believe and do stuff, and nobody was providing any good reasons.
I need to know why. The why question.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I'm not following. Like, it was always, growing up through grade school and all the way into high school, because we said so. And I'm like, well, that's a dumb answer, and that's unacceptable. So I know personally there's some disadvantages that obviously got me in a lot of trouble growing up. But if that's a gift. Everybody's been given gifts. The parable of the talents. What do you do with that? That's an energy, a divine energy God's given you. And if you direct it in the right way, that's exactly what allowed me personally to be like, I'm not falling for that because I don't believe I need good reasons. I need to be introspective. I'm not for arbitrary authorities. I'm not for coercion. These different things. I think a lot of people that rejected it have a similar spirit.
Yeah.
In that too. You mentioned too, I'm not a particularly holy person at all, but a holy person whose noose is cleaned, they would see it. So if they remember it says in Scripture, put first the kingdom of God and the rest will be added to you, right?
Right.
That person was able to see through all this stuff. First and foremost, and this gets to my kind of final point, the reason why people fell for it is because they made idols. They clouded their noose and they put things before God, and they didn't realize, and they still don't realize that.
Right.
That's, and we all do this.
Right. We all do it when we
sort of
sin.
kind of mystery as to why didn't my idols cloud me from seeing it? I don't know. Why did God give a grace for me to? We don't know how that all works out, but it will.
It's not a math equation.
Because God is looking at the whole human person through not at a particular point in time, but kind of kairotically as a whole, right? And they see you, and God interacts in that way. So I don't know. I'm not in that kind of.
Yeah, and that's why we can't, and that's why also the Orthodox Church, we don't make claims about people's salvation, because how can anybody make a judgment from the perspective of God on somebody's human soul? We can't.
But I can certainly say, if you went down the wrong road and you got a false conclusion, I can definitely tell you what influenced that.
Yeah.
And like I said, from the left paradigm, politically speaking, well, guess what they believe in? They believe in progressivism, right? Right? And anti-conservatism.
Right.
Second of all, they're all about centrally planning,
Yes.
and that the state and the authorities are the ones to do that, right? So, and they believe that's in the spirit of egalitarianism, so they push freedom down farther, and it's like, well, no, we need a kind of paternal, kind of elite class essentially plan. So they all buy into this,
Right.
just
And that's
by
what
nature
that's what I was kind of baiting you into at the epistemic question regarding the
Yeah.
left and the right, because I would say to some degree the left, whether they're conscientious or not, has already bought into that sort of postmodern epistemic turn where they believe, whether they think of they do or
that's
not,
right.
they believe in relativism, and that's why then the authoritative systems of the government or the technocratic figures that exist, that's why their word is gospel. Because they
Now, let me be fair and now provide the critique of the right paradigm, right?
yes, do.
Because so it doesn't mean they're any better, right?
No, and
'Cause
yet
what are they going to do? They're going to be
I
like,
would say
oh, we
so-
just
yeah.
go back to the founding fathers and this godless, atheistic Enlightenment philosophy, then everything will be fine, right? Now, I say that facetiously because they think everything was like a perfect kind of... They've fallen for the same thing of this kind of utopianism, right? Where, oh, wow, the beginnings of the United States of America, I mean, was just such a Christian... It's like all the people that came over here were a bunch of freak cult weirdos.
Don't call me
That
that.
couldn't get along with the religious norms in England, right? These people were freaks, right? And then the rest of them, the elites, weren't even Christian at all, were a bunch of Freemason, and all of them were the product and embraced a god, the same thing that we're critiquing. So both the principles bad. They just took it two different ways,
Right.
which is why
It's the libertine individualism versus the collectivism of the socialist, the communist, the whatever it is.
yeah.
It's like the
Now,
it's the strive between the multiplicity versus the unity thing, right? It's the one in the middle playing itself out in politics.
Now that doesn't mean so just because I critique both of those, so they both have false presuppositions, right? I certainly think one. That doesn't mean they're both moral equivalents. That because people will say like, oh, they're both evil, right? And it's like,
No, yeah, exactly. You can't do that because that's another form of like category or
another trap.
relativism. It's like things are on spectrums. Like that's why nuance, particularities, specifics. Like we can
you
both.
know what that's like saying?
Huh?
It's like, because people say this to me all the time. It's usually libertarians too. They're both evil. It's like, no, they're not. Like
Yeah. What ignorance and evil
like
is not the same
conservatives
thing.
in right-wing politics, like I'd say, is dumb and often annoying.
Yeah, ignorance
It's
and evil
not
is
a
not
death
the same.
cult, dude.
They're not trying to kill
It's
babies.
saying-
Like they're not trying to like take the
Hey, the
genitals off
Nazis
your child.
and what's the Salvation Army are both wrong. They're both evil. It's like, no, dude, they're not moral equivalent. They're both wrong, right, for different reasons, and maybe even tracing back to a fundamental same incorrect presupposition and principle, which one of Dante Germino's, I can't remember who it was, but it was a student of his or something. He says, Marxism and fascism, the two had, what was it? Communism and fascism, the two heretical twins of Marx.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a perfect.
I love that. I'll probably try to steal that one. I'm gonna.
Yeah,
try
I'm
to
like,
remember
they're
that one.
both. They both come from the same. Everything that we outlined here about Gnosticism. That's exactly both fascism and communism are Gnostic regimes, right? They started from the same point, and they took kind of different routes or something like that, but they're the same. They're the same.
Well, it's that unity. I mean, that's what I think is the perniciousness, and is that again going back. I don't mean to be a broken record, but talking about the demonic kenosis, it's just that people don't realize that they can. I'm going to make a members video called the Platonic malaise, like these Platonic ideals that people accept. They don't realize they don't have the sophistication, but this privileging of unity over multiplicity is something that people are they don't even realize that's what they're doing. They don't realize that they're falling into this kenosis, this oneness paradigm. And then who's controlling the unity? And that is then the technocracy, and now you've already been suckered in, and you can't get out because you've already got your stabbies, you got your vax pass. It's like, and that's where the humility. I've noticed this too. I've met a lot of people who were fooled at the beginning and got wise later, and I've met people who weren't fooled to begin with that slowly bought into the propaganda and then dove deeper and deeper. And so I think there's an element of humility here for the people that saw truth. Maybe they were fooled at first. Maybe they got the first set, and then they didn't get any more boosters because they said, "Oh, this stuff is crap. They're lying to me." Where then I saw other people that were really reluctant and maybe more "quote unquote" red pilled, but then because of the peer pressure, because of the government, because of the commercials, eventually then they got it, and then you saw their attitude almost shift in the opposite direction. And so that's a sort of pride because they don't want to not be a part of the group, and now they're the part of the group, and now they turn around and condemn the people they were just a part of.
And by the way, so I mean, certainly one recurrent theme is making idols,
Yeah.
right? And
Idolatry, yeah.
The right, conservative, America First,
They're
not immune from that either, because I guarantee you, if Trump told them to go take the stabbies, they would all.
Well, it's political idolatry, right? It's that they've put politics above ultimate like questions regarding religion and God and transcendental.
And again, it doesn't mean that stuff, and I even see from the left here, it doesn't mean that there's not some good stuff or true stuff. Like every paradigm has something. That doesn't mean they're all morally equivalent too.
Right.
Like one could be actually evil, and But I'd also say too, the other idolization that was very clear is, who all fell for this? All the professors and lovers of the people that prided themselves. Maybe this goes to exactly what we're saying, the lack of humility. That I'm on the side of progress in science, and almost every single professor, they were the worst for it, right?
I agree.
I'm like, what does it say in Romans? In professing to become wise, they became fools.
Yeah, that's it.
Professors and the intelligentsia are the dumbest people. It's the kind of dumb that you got to go to
because
school
it's worldly dogma.
Pay tons of money to get.
Yeah, they hate dogma in regards to institutional religion, but they themselves then live in a worldly dogma. At least our dogma, we believe as Christians, transcends this world and is true wisdom. It's true knowledge. Their
they
dogma,
believe they're the gatekeepers, and in some sense, they practically.
They plan that too. I mean, that's the intention, and I think a lot of these professors.
We're actually going to. I mean, I don't even know if there's maybe a handful of professors that I actually know that even resisted this. It's like they all just went straight into, and I'm like,
I don't know any, but I'm in Berkeley, like my school. I don't know anybody from where I go to school who resisted it.
Yeah, and the other thing too is they certainly have the social pressure that, because it's like, well, you want tenure and you want to be esteemed by your colleagues, and so they were the most susceptible were the professors, and the reason why is because, again, here's a total normie position. I believed it when I first was going to get a PhD, that I thought that was the elite. If I could make there, then I'd be part of the elite class. Right. These are the people that matter. These are the people that everybody else should look up. And by the way, medical doctors feel the exact same way. Yep. Oh, we're special, right? It's like, I would say, all of that group are the worst people. Like we should not be looking up to them at all.
No.
There are very, very few academic colleagues or professors that I actually even look up to. God forgive me, but I actually disdain most.
I do too.
And the reason why is because I think academia and intelligentsia is dumb and stupid. It's a brainwashing, and you made an idol of it, and you think that you're somebody. You're nobody.
Right.
You're going to be for Judgment Day, and you're going to be held more accountable for. And the only academics that I actually respect are the ones that really did stand up to this.
Yeah, the ones that challenge the system. And it's like the rogue scholars that the academy, again, the institutions are kind of leery of, but that, I mean, it's
Dr.
like
David
that's
Bradshaw, I'm talking about you. No,
Um,
but like here's a great scholar. I mean, I hope he doesn't mind me giving him praises. But here's a great scholar, the best in his field, I would say, and he's much nicer than me, right? Like
Who's
I'm a
this?
fighter. I'm like, where are they? I'm ready to fight.
Who's this?
Dr. David Bradshaw.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, I didn't realize he stood up and I didn't hear some of that.
Oh,
stuff.
he doesn't believe in any of this stuff.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
like he's been great the whole time but he's a better man than I am because he's just so much. He's more humble than I am, and he's more gentle.
Right.
And it's like you can. It's fairly easy for you to get upset with me because I'm a bit more forceful and ready for fights. I'm no Jay Dyer, but right.
Speaking of Jay, again, we got our his event down in Florida. I hope to see everybody. Be hanging out in St. Augustine. I'll actually be speaking at his event on September 3rd in Orlando. Well, Father Deacons,
I really do.
Oh, dude, that'd been so much fun if we could spend a Labor Day weekend on the Florida Atlantic side beach, have some drinks, talk philosophy, go to liturgy.
What day is that? Maybe if I start driving now.
Yeah.
When's Labor Day?
Yeah, we'll be there from the 1st to the 6th in St. Augustine, and the event is in Orlando, which is an hour and a half away. So anybody who can make it, go to St. Augustine for Labor Day weekend. Dyer and myself will be hanging out.
You just have to stream me.
I know. We'll FaceTime you and then rub it in.
Embrace the technocracy.
Yeah. I'll FaceTime you when I'm on about my third mojito and show you like the mint leaves and how ice cold it is and how beautiful the sky and the beach is.
I'll just have to use my alchemical manipulation and formulas to transcend my physical space and upload myself into the cloud.
There you go. We'll just have a hologram. We'll just hologram you there.
Yeah.
Just put on your VR set, stay in Montana, and then there'll be an image of you there, and then you can interact, and we can.
That's science. See?
Well, is there anything you want to say before hopping into some super chats here? I think we hit, that was a great introduction to.
Dang, man, we covered
a lot, and that was
covered a lot of stuff.
We got to start doing monthly streams.
I did like that you were talking about the unity. I think that maybe you should look into, with your own research, like get some good quotes. From,
if you got good books, dude, send. I think the stream's getting ready to end on people.
Oh no.
Yep.
All right.
No. We came back. We got it. Oh, see, the server from my ISP, the servers keep messing up once in a while, and when they do maintenance, I can't stream because it doesn't give enough data back out to whoever I'm streaming towards, like YouTube or Rockfin, and so they'll shut off. It looked like it was getting ready to do that, but we're back. We're back. People are with us still. We're live. We're gonna dive into some super chats real quick. We're gonna run through these.
And with one thing,
go ahead.
So you talked about this obsession with kind of unity and stuff like that. That's a great point. I think that goes back to kind of a 19th century thinking, in particular, to reduce all explanations to kind of one single overarching formula.
Right.
I mean, you even have
and
Laplace,
the quest,
right?
The quest for one methodology was the difference between the British empiricism and then the phenomenological school.
Yeah.
It's like,
so this makes sense. You already see this in Saint Simon and Comte. They literally talk about it. There can only be one science, one government, one religion,
one methodology,
one organization of all social classes. Now, of course, they're going to allow for the elite to, because who's going to be able to enforce the one, right? So it never is technically one. But I think that's a great point that you had brought this you had already picked up on this obsession with unity. And you could, there could be several sources where that comes from, right? You already have this in kind of ancient kind of mysticism and different stuff like that.
Well, and when you're
But
talking
you have it right in the 19th
Yeah.
century too, and that's what you said. That all these things kind of coalesce
Yeah.
into an ideology that we call scientism and technocracy.
And when you were
And
talking
that
about
I end.
how evil, like the deconstructionism, how evil can't create, we can even see again politically. They're talking about Antifa, no border, no wall, no USA at all. The dissolution of national borders. So again, for the regionification of the world as described in COVID-19, the Great Reset, and basically establishing new regions in a one world government. That this sort of dissolution of boundaries, the privileging of unity. It's reminiscent in every single sort of appeal that they offer people. It's like this. It's this. We're going to move towards unity, and it's going to be better and save you.
People are saying I have audio problem. I can't ever tell if it's a you or a me problem. But if I took the Gnostic attitude, I will actually be the savior for it now.
Well, I reset your audio, so it should be fine. I don't. People were talking about an echo, but that was on your end somehow. I don't hear it because we're going through Zoom, and you sound totally fine to me. So
Well,
I don't.
Crispy Johnson, who is also from the same alma mater in Ireland.
Oh
is,
yeah,
If he says it's good, then it is good. That's a trustworthy person.
yeah. Well, he's recently been appointed to his doctor position. I don't know if you've seen.
Well, that's it. That's the great thing about Gnostic Scientism is you can just create your own reality, doctoral. The dissolution of boundaries, right, allows me to put whatever title I want.
Because that really then is what progress is. Like in this worldview, progress is just dissolving more and more boundaries. And it's that deconstructionist spirit. And so even with the nation state, like I said, the dissolving of national boundaries, how they're not advocating for people to have more children for population replacement. They're flooding the country with illegals. So again, you see, it's not about like the spirit to create. Like you're talking about evil and deconstruction. Like they're deconstructing the country. They're deconstructing the nation state, and they're flooding it with more people because they don't want people to actually create and have babies.
Yep. Total death cult, dude.
Yeah, it is a death cult. That's actually what it is. All right, first super chat comes from the great and wonderful Rachel Wilson. Throws in $5 and says, "Hey, fellas, watching while I get in my cardio." Well, good for you, getting in your daily cardio. I know she's meal prepping and hitting the health thing pretty seriously, so shout out to Rachel.
Meal preps.
Huh?
That's the way you got to do the meal preps. Otherwise, you'll fall into the temptations of
So
food that isn't great.
And shout out to Andrew as well. Talked with your husband today on the phone. And for those of you who don't know, Jim Bob and Posh Redneck are doing a live stream tonight, of which they'll be debating JF and Richard Spencer on evolution. So that should be interesting nonetheless. So if you guys are...
Richard Spindrift.
There you go. Richard Spindrift. But she says, "Hey fellas, watching while I get in my cardio. Big based mom hugs to you both. Thanks for the amazing stream." Well, thank you so much, Rachel. God bless you and Andrew, and hope the family's doing well. Yes. Next super chat comes from Pim Orso. Says, "Have any one of you guys read The Curse of Canaan, a demonology of history?"
No, it sounds interesting though.
I've never heard of it before. That's my first time hearing of it. But let me do a quick Amazon search for
I've read The Never-Ending Story. Let's do a philosophical
there it is, The Curse of Canaan. I'll definitely look that.
Yeah.
Who is the publisher? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Pim, for the $5 super chat on have any of you guys read The Curse of Canaan, a demonology of history? I have not. Father Deacon Doctor has not, but we'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you very much. Shout out to J.M. Kellum, 504, throws in two $10 super chats with no comments. Thank you so much, J.M. Kellum, 504. Really appreciate the support, brother. Next super chat comes from Velator, throws in $4.99. How much did the iconoclasm of Islam, i.e. about the ban on drawing humans, influence the iconoclastic heresies in the church? So
absolutely. There was absolutely a connection there. I make that point all the time.
you want to speak on that for a second?
Well, I mean, just think about like when iconoclasm comes into the church, right?
Yeah.
Right at the same time as the rise of Islam and where Islam's arising and stuff like that. And the influence of that within the empire and stuff like that. And then that seems just to be obviously very clear.
Yeah.
What it's a more interesting thesis too, that it's harder kind of geographically and in terms of chronology to kind of make is the influence of Islam iconoclasm on Protestantism.
Oh, that's
That's
interesting.
harder, but there's a link there
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, when I first read the question, I immediately thought about the sort of the problem with Christology and how Islam had basically adopted the Nestorian Christology of the Church of the East, which then deals with the nature. Well, they took the Arian side, I think, and so that sort of then deifies man. So then it brings him down. Whereas Orthodox, God became a man. There's no problem drawing an image of a man. I mean, it's been deified. It's been sanctified. God is a man. The second person is a man. And so I think that could be the Christological elements between Islam and Arianism and some of these heresies leads then to the form of man not being worthy of veneration.
Yeah. Or not being deified, yeah.
Yeah,
You certainly, it's only through the correct Christology of the Eastern Orthodox Church
that everything falls into place.
that, we can make an argument for iconography.
Shout out to Made by
and
Jim
that's-
Bob. He says, "Where's Marty Leeds?"
Love your stuff, Jim Bob. Really love your music, man.
Yeah.
Do more of that.
Yeah, God bless you tonight, Jim Bob, in the debate. Wishing you nothing but the
Yeah,
best.
we're praying for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Velator, for that super chat. Next super chat comes from JM Kellum 504 again. He throws in $5 and says, "I wish David Patrick Harry or Father Deacon Dr. Ananias would do a video refuting Mark Passio and natural law. I have some people that constantly bring Passio up." Are you familiar with Mark Passio?
No, but I know about natural law.
Yeah, it wouldn't be hard to defeat. He's basically, he's sort of he's like Gnostic. I don't know if he's still Gnostic, but he's all about natural law and has created like this whole sort of subgenre that follow him. He's deep in the conspiracy stuff. He sells like discs and CDs.
I think I know who it is.
Yeah,
Now you're talking
and
about that.
he was kind of he's kind of in the same ballpark as like Jordan Maxwell. Do you remember the Jordan Maxwell?
Yep.
And so, and God rest his soul, he recently passed away. But he's kind of in that same vein, that same line. And he's all about natural law and sort of Gnostic Christianity. So I think that may be something. Maybe that'll be the future stream we'll do together. We'll just do a stream. Maybe that'll be the next one we do is refuting natural law. That'd be useful. And we can bring up Mark Passio and maybe play a few clips. We'll just use Zoom here, share the screen in Zoom so then they can see our screen. We'll just play a few videos, and then we can critique them. I think that'd probably be a really useful stream. Maybe that's what we'll do next. So thank you, J.M. Kellum, for 504 for that super chat. I think you just came up with our next conversation topic. Pim Orsov throws in $10 and says, "You and DPH have the most deep philosophical conversations. God bless." Well, thank you very much, Pim. I appreciate that. Father Deacon's much more versed than I am, but the philosophy thing, it's a lot of hard work. You're not given it overnight, right? So that's where I think it's like health. It's like something you have to work on to know philosophy and be able to sort of grapple with those ideas. That's
sort
a
of like
process.
this awesome beard.
It's like a beard. It's a process. It's something that grows. You got to develop it. So we both appreciate that, and if we make these conversations intelligible to the audience, then we've done our job, and hopefully they're useful for people, God willing. Next super chat comes from Josu Garza. Josu Garza throws in $10 and says, "Progressives, quote, Christianity was just a tool used by the medieval elite to control the masses. How can you still believe a dark age fairy tale, unquote? Also progressive, yes, age of Aquarius, science will set us free. We will be with Mother Gaia, chop off the top. Or chop off the tip is what he said.
Is this guy being sarcastic about that? He's got to be with them.
Yeah, no, yeah, he's Orthodox apparently. Yeah, he's saying progressives mock, basically he's saying progressives mock Christianity as a medieval form of the elite to control the masses, but then progressives also say, yes, age of Aquarius, science will set us free, we will be with Mother Gaia, and then he says hashtag chop it off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
oh, that's hilarious. Josu Garza, couldn't agree more, and it shows you the innate irony of the sort of progressive worldview and their inability to make any sort of objective, legitimate critiques of anything. But thank you so much for that. And last super chat comes from Jurgen the Stray. Says, no question, I just have been really appreciative of your work and wanted to support a little. Throws in $5. Thank you so much, Jurgen the Stray. Really appreciate that. Anything you want to say before hopping off here, Father?
Yeah, we got to do more of these streams.
Yes, we do. We got to get your content creation. We got to tick that notch up. But you're going to be hitting semester now, so it's going to be tough to create content. That's why it'll be useful for you to come onto my channel, where then I can already set up the premise, set up the live stream, and then all you have to do is just click join the Zoom meeting and then speak in the microphone. So,
what I'll probably do is I always like to, be efficient in whatever I do, and so I'll probably, get a lot of ideas. This is what I love about teaching. This is the good part about it, is that it gives me so many different ideas as I'm working through and learning this stuff again and learning new stuff as you're teaching. That helps me with, even content. So
and thinking through ideas. I mean, that's what these streams too. People don't, they're just as beneficial for me than anybody else. Because as anybody who teaches anything knows, you have to teach yourself first before you can teach anybody else. So then you kind of have that topic or that knowledge in your back pocket. And so that's why I think Dyer and people who create content are so intellectually sharp, is because you have to be, more so than an academic who just sits there and is rarely challenged and is only refuting somebody else who wrote a book, and there's a year and a half lag between criticisms. It's like in the internet debate and everything, it's like immediate criticism, immediate having to respond and stay on your toes. And so I think it really sharpens one's intellect.
Absolutely. Yeah. That and science will show you. Science. Listen to my word, science.
All right. Well, Father, thank you so much for coming on. God bless you and the wife. Hope everybody is doing well over in the great state of Montana. Shout out to Father Russell as well. Hope he's doing well.
Great priests. Got great priests up here, and it's just we just had our Serb Fest.
Oh, nice.
I'll just tell you a little bit about that. This is crazy. So you remember how crowded it was when you came for the conference? How many people we had?
At church? Yeah, at the Holy Trinity.
For the Serb Fest, we were doing tours. Father was joking. He's like, oh, the good deacons earned his place in heaven for having to listen to me repeat 6 tours that were an hour and a half.
Oh,
I actually enjoyed it. But we had even more. We had lines going out. We had 4,000 people come through and were exposed to Orthodoxy just that day.
Wow.
6 tours, totally filled up out the door. So that's 200-300 people.
Jeez. Glory to God.
We're expecting, we always said a good 25 to 50 people will convert to Orthodoxy because of that. And it was just amazing. Father Russ was so good at deconstructing the other paradigm and getting people to see Orthodoxy and what that is, the differences between the East and the West, but not in a me, he's so much better than I am.
We're too academic, bro. That's we're already tarnished. We're tarnished goods.
Listen to my words, apodictic, apophatic. Indubitability.
Yeah,
Why can't you understand what I'm saying?
we're tarnished goods. We're only for a niche audience. Where Father Russell, he's much more relatable probably than either one of us in how we talk about orthodoxy. And that's the beauty of, again, why he's able to go into the places he is and be in the community he is in Butte. And people respect him and look up to him because it's not repent, you're about to die tomorrow and Jesus is coming. But at the same time, we are the church. This is the truth, and this is how we're different. And the way he just shares the faith, I think, is really beautiful.
Yeah, I'm truly blessed. I mean, it's a 120-year-old parish, founded by St. Sebastian of Dordovic, consecrated by St. Tikhon, the Enlightener of America. And here I am in one of the most beautiful states, if not the most beautiful state in the Union. And I'm God's too gracious. It's wonderful too.
It's true. Well, that's a good note to end on. Everybody, please smash that like. I will be back Monday with a stream. I'm contemplating doing a theology of rocks and talking about crystals and the New Age and even the Kaaba stone. And
wow,
so
that's awesome. Actually, that's a great topic.
The theology of rocks. Yeah, it's amazing how many people. The crystal stuff is like out of control right now. It's more popular now than I feel like it was when I was in.
That's
the New
crazy.
Age.
I mean, I guess we don't really get it up here, but I've wondered about that. Like, did it just die off, or when you're saying it's actually more popular than ever?
No, that's what especially for women, I've had multiple people reach out to me. Hey, you need to do a stream on crystals. My sister's into crystals, or this person's into crystals. Everybody's talking about crystals, and it's like, all right, we'll do a theology of rocks.
You should start your stream off with that clip from Napoleon Dynamite where he has the time machine, he has the crystal, and he's looking shot. He's, oh!
I just shared an Uncle Rico clip where he throws a steak and it's Napoleon in the face on my Instagram. But yeah, guys, I will be back Friday, most likely with the theology of rocks. I got a few ideas. I was wanting to do one also. I may do on I was going to do one on correcting your family tree. So I just did a stream before this one on the death of man being like rootlessness, like being divorced from his ancestors and how they're doing that through the divorce courts, the culture, sexuality, all this different stuff. But then I was thinking, well, then I need to create a stream if we're being divorced from our family trees and our ancestry. I want to talk then about how orthodoxy is an opportunity for us all then to sort of correct potential family errors, whether it be Protestantism or Catholicism or Islam or Hermeticism or atheism or whatever it is. And so then you can bring up your children in the true faith. And this is a sort of correcting of a family tree. And your family tree is only going to prosper because the Orthodox Church wants you to have kids, wants you to have babies. I don't know. So one of those topics, I don't know.
Good one, yeah.
But anyways, guys, I will see you all Friday. Thank you so much, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. Again, everybody go to look up Patristic Faith here on YouTube as well as Instagram. And then I know you have, where do you prefer people to follow you the most? Twitter, Telegram, Instagram, YouTube? Probably.
Dang, that's an excellent question. I never thought about that.
Well, my go-to, it's YouTube, Instagram, Telegram. That's kind of like my thing.
Yeah, like
I'm not a big Twitter guy.
Like I have a Patristic Faith Twitter and a Father Ananias Twitter. So, and the same with Telegram too. So either of those are great. I'm probably most active posting stuff on Twitter though.
Oh, you're a tweeter. I'm an Instagram guy. I'm more on Instagram. Twitter, it's too much.
Instagram feels like it takes too long for me to.
It's ironic because people would look at you and the way you speak that you're the more slow down, sort of melodic type person. Actually, that's me, and I'm all like bing bing bop boom like when I'm talking and streaming. But then when I'm not, and then you're more like the, you need the speed.
Yeah, I just want to get this stream over, dude. I want to get down to it, man.
All right. Well, we will do that right now.
I'm just messing. It was truly an honor. God bless all of you. God bless.
I think doing a stream on natural law, and then I'll prepare the Mark Passio side of it, and then we'll play those clips. I mean, you don't even have to know who Mark Passio is, and then you can watch him. We can watch them both together live. and then make comments on it. I think that'd be really good for people. So, man, let's try to plan that maybe in the next few weeks. I know you got school going on, so it's gonna your schedule's about to jump up, but maybe
school's easy. Lecturing's easy.
But we'll have to do that. I think a lot of people would like that one. So
Yeah, awesome, man.
all right. Well, God bless everyone. I will see y'all Friday.